Okay, so who's that? Sybil Shepherd.
No.
Who is that?
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Okay. These are autographed photographs Dan's showing me.
I just bought like a lot of autographed photographs.
Who's that?
Good guess, Ralph. Lena Olin.
Okay, Lena
I've already
Olin.
sent some of these away to people.
Uh-huh. Who's that?
Gaga.
That's Lady Gaga?
Lady Gaga.
Huh. I don't recognize celebrities at all. Like I could be sitting right next to them and I won't recognize them.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna.
So I recognize voices. Like I remember one time I heard William Shatner's voice, and I looked up, there he was. Or another voice that I recognized from across the deli was Bob Einstein. Super Dave Osborne. Yeah. I mean, that's an obvious. It's Funkhauser. Hey everybody, welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs, track by track. I'm Roth Bagdasarian.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We're taking this journey together, Roth and I, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our first season, we've picked none other than Rush.
Today on Backtracking, it's the dawn of a new decade, Rush fans, so wipe that Zinca off your nose and throw that Izod in the trash. Grab your black tea and ripped jeans because we're about to hear arguments on behalf of the band's 13th studio album, Presto. We'll give the jury directions based on the evidence. And who's the jury?
I, the jury, Roth. After the completion of 1988's spring tour in support of Hold Your Fire, Rush made the decision to end their distribution relationship with Mercury Records with the release of A Show of Hands. As a result, they had no deadlines to meet for the first time since the mid-70s. So it wasn't until after a chill 6 months off that they decided to reconvene to make plans for the next record. They started off in much the same way as the last few records. Gad and Alex would spend their days in the studio working out music, and Neil would retire to a nearby cabin to write lyrics. And then they'd meet up in the evening to show and not tell. The band reached out to producer Peter Collins to make plans for recording since, with all the progress, the band was pleased.
But Collins was not. He reluctantly declined the band's offer to produce in favor of other projects. And so Rush went back to the well, calling on 1980s hitmaker Rupert Hine, who first had been approached by the band to work on Grace Under Pressure. Hine's resume included a number of interesting, if undeniably 80s synth-heavy bands like The Fix, Howard Jones, and the Thompson Twins. Nonetheless, the band and Hine set out to record what they pledged would be a return to guitar-driven rock. And where did they set out to record? Why, none other than that studio that's made from the dust of stars with oceans flowing in its veins, Le Studio. They finished recording a month ahead of schedule, and the album was released just a few weeks prior to the end of the decade.
So what else was happening at the twilight of the 80s? The Berlin Wall comes down after Gunter Schabowski accidentally states on live TV that new travel rules between East and West Germany will take effect immediately. This is followed by communist parties across Soviet Eastern Europe ceding their political monopolies. The very first commercial dial-up internet connection was made in the US, and The Simpsons premieres. And of course, NWA's Straight Outta Compton is certified platinum.
Wait, so how do you accidentally state on live TV that new travel? Like, how does this go?
It's kind of an amazing story. He was a government official, and he was at a live press conference discussing changes that would be happening to the travel rules between East and West Germany. Of course, for all the kiddies out there, Germany used to be split up into two different countries. East Germany was communist and effectively controlled by the Soviet Russians. West Germany was a democracy. And citizens of East Germany could not exit East Germany and go into West Germany, and kind of vice versa. West Germans couldn't go into East Germany. So anyway, this guy was at a live press conference discussing how they were going to loosen up the rules. And apparently he accidentally said this is going to take effect immediately. And it was just they stormed the Bastille basically. And that was it.
Oh, that's funny. Well, it was West Germany that had Rammstein.
That is true. That is true, Rob. There was this was also the dawn, of course, on all, of all those bands like Kraftwerk, the kind of German techno. What would you call that music, Roth? Electronic?
Techno. Yeah, it was techno. Post-punk techno. Post-punk techno. So I opened up my my intro by saying, "Hey, everybody." For those who listen to Hidden Forces podcast, that was my nod to Dimitri Kofinas, who opens up every podcast with, "Hey, everybody." So I figured I'd try something new this time.
Well, wow. Look at that cross-promotion, Roth.
Yep.
Are we getting paid by Hidden Forces?
Maybe. I mean, this is sort of like a one-way collab here. So anyways, we're here to discuss Presto.
Yeah, we are.
So let's tell the folks a little bit about this. So it came out November 21st, 1989. I remember vividly when this album came out, because I always talk about driving to Syracuse in the fall.
You do all of your best stories, Rob, are about when you were driving to Syracuse with your family. Yes. I believe to visit your aunt.
Yes, my aunt. And this album came out like the weekend or the week before that trip to Syracuse for Thanksgiving. So, of course, I listened to it in the backseat of the car, driving through the cold, fall air of the 90 freeway during dusk as we rolled on into Syracuse. And so it was very interesting. And I remember when it came out, it was a big deal that Rush is returning to guitar-driven rock. Like, that was what everyone was talking about.
Yeah, it really is something that I'm sure we're going to discuss frequently throughout this podcast. Really, the next two episodes. It was kind of in retrospect, a really significant change that the band talks about, that a lot of the fans talk about. But I'll be really interested, Rafi, to see whether you think that the change in their sound is as significant as kind of everyone seems to have,
Do you want to talk about that now, or you want to talk about it later?
No, I want to talk about it. Maybe as we get into the production, we can talk about that a little bit. But I definitely, I have some thoughts on that. I'm sure you do.
Let's get into the production, because this is 11 tracks on it, and we don't want to put people to sleep, and we want to spend time talking about the meat, the carcass of this album.
Roth loves to talk about meat.
I love talking about. I had a Chateaubriand last night. I shared it with my wife. It was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Fancy pants. All right, go for it, Roth. What production? So I guess maybe the first thing that we should discuss here is Peter Collins. Two records and fucking gone, right?
Do we know why he left? Was it because they said, "Hey, we want to do guitar-driven rock," and he's like, "Fuck you, motherfuckers! I want to do synths," and then he left? Is that the reason why?
No, I don't know for sure. I have looked across a few different sources to try and figure this out. And from what I could tell, Roth, Peter Collins was offered, was asked to record the record. He declined because he said that he just wanted to work with some different bands. He kind of wanted to expand his horizons. It does sound to me like maybe that's kind of like the, it's not you, it's me breakup move.
What did he produce after or during the time he would have produced this? Do we know?
That's a terrific question. I didn't look that up, but maybe Ralph, why don't you look that up real quick? Because I have one thing before we dive deeper into the production conversation. I do have one correction that I want to make about our Hold Your Fire podcast. An error that I made.
Yes.
You do? Okay. So the first major error is I had this whole story about how originally Rush was going to ask they wanted Kirsty MacColl to do the backgrounds on Time Stand Still. I don't know how that got into my head. There is a very kind of roundabout connection between Kirsty MacColl and Rush. She was married to one of the guys who had produced the band over the years. But my assertion that they asked her to sing, I cannot find a source that supports that. I don't know where I got that. Apparently, the two people that they asked and they couldn't get to do it before they got Amy Mann were Cyndi Lauper and Chrissie Hynde.
Interesting. Both solid choices, I think, and they would have brought their own personality to it, just the way Amy Mann did.
Yeah. I mean, both very interesting voice. I would probably say that I think all three of those women have non-traditional voices. Yeah, in my opinion.
I think you're.
Anyway, I apologize for that disinformation, guys.
I had a bigger fuck up. So I said when I would listen to albums, and we're talking about what was the last track off of Hold Your Fire?
Open water. No.
High
water.
So I said that, it was just like the last track off of Joshua Tree, Children of the Disappeared. First of all, it's the second to last song off of Joshua Tree. And the song is Mothers of the Disappeared, not Children of the Disappeared. So I do apologize for anyone that spent many, many restless nights not being able to sleep because I did that. So I'm looking at Peter Collins' discography here.
Okay.
He does return to Rush. He produces 2 more albums, which we'll get into in the next. So it's not like he completely left Rush, but he did the Indigo Girls around this time, Adventures of Ford Fairlane, and then he put together Chronicles, and then which was a compilation, which we're not going to review compilations in this podcast. And then he produced Empire for Queensryche, which came out in 1990. So
interesting.
It's not that he was afraid of guitar-driven rock, obviously. Indigo Girls is just guitar. They're not rock necessarily, but they're just vocal and guitars. So he's not afraid of the organic sound. So it must have been he had either previous or prior commitments. It doesn't seem like there was any bad blood, though, because he did come back to produce 2 other albums, and in addition to Chronicles, the compilation album.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I do think it's interesting, Peter Collins. What I think is interesting about what they did with the producers here, they went back to Rupert Hine, who they had asked to produce Grace Under Pressure, and he declined. And if you look at kind of the work that Rupert Hine was doing during this time, he really is the type of producer that you would imagine they would ask if they want to move in this more synth-heavy direction. He really worked with all of these, I think, good and interesting bands, but bands that I think, especially in retrospect, feel very trapped in the 80s. I'm talking about Howard Jones, Thompson Twins. There's definitely some merit in these bands, but there is no question that they feel and especially today kind of sound of their time. But they went back to Rupert Hine for the album that was going to be their move away from that kind of music. So I just think it's kind of a weird choice, to be honest with you. Yeah.
I think he worked out pretty well, though. And I think he has some vocal moments on this. Like, I don't know if it was him or Neil that said, "That's nice."
Yeah. One of the worst moments on the album, if we're going to be honest, right?
I thought you would love it because it's just it's a button at the end of a song. It doesn't fade out. They could
it isn't a fade out. But if they had just not done that little bumper of "That's nice," it would have ended fine. But we can get to that when we get to that.
So
anyway,
what else do we want to talk about the production of this album? So it was Le Studio. Album
was Le Studio. Back to Le Studio. Back to like your Valhalla, Raf. Were you excited about that?
I was, and you could tell, you could hear it, but it's a very different sound, right? I mean,
very different sound.
The last time they were at Le Studio, it was much harder rock sound. And what's interesting, and I think you alluded to this just a few moments ago, but my memory fails me because I'm getting old. But
thanks for paying attention to what I say so carefully, Rafi.
Even though this is, and I mentioned something to this effect, I think during Power Windows, that even when you hear the band playing without any synths at all, it still sounds kind of synthy. It still sounds kind of like more modern. And even when Alex is playing these guitar driven riffs, his guitar sound is much I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say synthy, but it's not as hard rock. It's a little softer. It's a little edgier.
It is.
So it's even when they return to this guitar driven rock of Presto, we're not talking like, working man sounding guitar, right? It's not like the Les Paul, really fuzzy kind of sound. It's a much more ethereal, sort of airy, spacious kind of sound.
Oh, really? So I actually, my impression of the guitar sound across this album is somewhat similar to yours. I do feel like the moments when he's kind of like, when it's light, it's cleaner than I would expect, and it is more kind of spacious, but especially clean. It's quite a clean sound. Mm-hmm. But his playing, I feel like he does a lot more like really firmly rhythmic playing on this, including some like just basic kind of almost palm muted stuff in a few of the songs. It isn't like a full, Iron Maiden, like Metallica kind of a palm mute, 16th notes or something. But there are parts of some of these songs where he does much more rhythmic playing that he just, you just, whether he was doing it in the last few albums, the last 4 albums or not, you don't really hear it as much in the mix as you do on this. So I kind of had this mixed impression of his playing on this album. I don't think his sound goes as far into hard rock as I kind of expected it to, given the reputation of the album. So I would agree with you there. But I do think the style of playing in certain spots on this album is a little bit more rhythmic and I don't want to say aggressive. I guess I'd just say rhythmic.
Yeah. But it's not as aggressive, and it is more melodic, and it is cleaner guitar sounds, and there's a lot more modern effects on his guitar. So like I said, even when they're just playing as a trio, bass, guitar, and drums, it still sounds way crisper. And I think people tend to subconsciously or otherwise confuse that for synthy. So there was never, you're never going back. I mean, maybe when we get to Vapor Trails, we kind of get back to that really guitar-driven rock where it's a little more bottom end. But they really, stay in this zone for the next several albums. I love it. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm not like saying I dislike it, but it was also during a time when a lot of distribution was happening on cassette tape. So a lot of the production of these albums was very top-endy to counter the top end that would be cutting out on invariably on cassette tapes.
Yeah, when you turned on that Dolby noise reduction on your cassette tape, you lost a little bit of that nonsense.
I never used that shit. I was like, what? It just basically like, let's dampen the sound of everything and make it sound like shit.
So, Ross, one of the things that I think that it struck me just about the production of the kind of arrangement, just an overall impression of this album. I was reading about the band's impression of this album kind of in, looking back at it. And one of the things that Geddy said is he feels like this is a singer's album. This is an album that really the instrumentation kind of is built around the singing and the melody lines. And
interesting.
I really do, maybe I was colored by that comment when I was listening to it, but I totally heard that. And it struck me how poppy, again, these songs are. Set aside the production and the instrumentation, right? Set aside kind of everything about it and just pretend these songs are being played on like an acoustic guitar and sung right before the band even approaches them. I feel like this songwriting is just as poppy as on Hold Your Fire. Not in the case of every single song, and I would say across the board, I don't think the songwriting is as strong as Hold Your Fire, but I think it's very much in the same vein. It isn't as though the band, when they went to guitar-driven rock, that means that they went back to guitar-driven prog rock. I mean, they really are just kind of going more towards guitar-driven pop rock.
So it's interesting that Ged said that, because one of the comments I made, just a broad comment about the entire album, is I think this is some of Neil Peart's best lyric writing ever. Like, I think the lyrics in this album are just fantastic from soup to nuts. And if you're the one singing those lyrics, I could see why you'd put an emphasis on this is a real singer's album. I didn't think that just from listening to the vocal melodies. I mean, as we go through this album, I'll think about it again. But absolutely, one of the top comments that I had was, wow, the lyric writing on this is so mature, so inventive, just across the board. So this is one of my favorite albums from a lyric perspective.
And from a lyric perspective, I think the through line for me in one of my notes here was, I think that there's more first person writing on this album, and it seems as though Peart is more comfortable with expressing his personal emotions less obliquely on this album than on prior albums.
I agree. Yeah, maybe that's why it so resonates so much.
Yeah, and I do think that especially the songs that are kind of evocative or on their face seem to be about his relationships or his own feelings, I think they tend to work better on this album than really anywhere else through his career. And for me, it just felt like he was being a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more personal, which I loved.
Yeah, and he's not like he's averse to revealing himself. He's just a shy guy in real life.
So the last thing about the production that I just wanted to put into your head as we re-listen to this, Raf, this was my one comment. I would love to hear, this is never going to happen, obviously. Maybe with AI we could do this, but I would like to hear the Rush that recorded Presto and the producer that produced Presto take the material on Hold Your Fire and re-record the whole thing.
Rush should do that. Rush should put out like Rush What If.
I think it would be really interesting because, again, I think we went through Hold Your Fire in the last episodes and the songs are just so great on that album. And I do think that maybe the only reason that you could say they don't hold up quite as well is because the instrumentation and the production is a little bit dated. It feels of its time, I think, a little bit. Whereas like the Presto kind of approach is, I think, stands up a little bit better now.
Yeah.
And I just really love to hear what those songs would sound like with maybe the keyboard turned down to 7 and Alex turned up to 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think AI, well, I mean, you can definitely like get stems from stereo recordings using AI. So you could do it.
Well, Raf, why don't you get on that and just shoot me an email when you're done and I'll give it a listen.
So tell me about the album art. What did you discover about this album art? It's not my favorite.
Yeah, this is real album art. So even
you can't draw it. You can't draw it by yourself because it's like a photo of rabbits. It's
a photo of rabbits. It is. Even Hugh Syme said that this is a pretty straightforward cover compared to the rest of the covers that they've ever done for the band. Yeah. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think the text treatment is shit. It feels super dated. I think that it isn't a bad photo on the cover. I don't actively dislike it, but it just doesn't do much for me. The only thing, as I studied, I went to the fucking woodshed with this cover, and I just really, was in there trying to pull some meaning out of it. The only thing that made me kind of like interested is, do you think that this cover is a subtle parody of the cover of Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it's evocative of it. Yeah.
It was to me as well. I don't know. I'm just going to put it out there.
So in my house, where I have all the Rush album art, this I would put in the garage or like the back mud room.
The mud room, really?
Yeah, the back mud room.
Yeah, no, this is one of their weaker covers. I think we can agree on that.
Now, our dear listener, it has nothing to do with the music. It's just the cover, because the music, as we'll discuss, is another story.
Well, we'll see, Ralph. We'll see. You don't know how I feel about this album and these lyrics, so we're going to get deep into the conversation. But do you want to do that now, Ralph?
Yeah. So this, now take yourself back to fall of 1989. You're about to drive to your aunt's house in Syracuse, New York, and this album drops right before you're about to take this like long trip, and you got a brand new portable CD player that takes 4 AA batteries, and it lasts for about 2 hours before you got to replace the batteries, and it skips because you only have like maybe 3 seconds buffering because that's all you could afford. Take yourself back to that time, and you turn on this album, side
Ralph,
one.
What kind of a car are you in?
This would have been probably a Pontiac 6000 station wagon.
You wouldn't have taken the Toyota Previa up there?
Ooh, no, you're right. No, that was a 90. We might have had the Previa by then. It was we might have gotten it right before 1990, but it was a 1990 Toyota Previa. So
yeah, which seat were you in, do you think?
I don't remember.
I mean, were your brothers both there?
They would have been there, yeah.
Okay, so, but, I'm assuming, your folks would have been in the front seats.
I would have been in the middle.
Three boys who would have been...
Yeah.
Because the Previa my recollection of the Previa is you had 2 captain's chairs in the middle row, and then there was a third row that was a bench.
Oh, that's right. I didn't know that. I forgot about that. I don't remember, but it only had a door on one side.
That's right. That's right. That was before the auto industry came up with the 2-door technology.
No, the original minivan had 2 doors. I think they just were being special and they wanted
skimped out on the Previa.
Yeah. So the first track comes in at 5 minutes, and this is a pretty long album. There's 11 tracks on it.
Yeah.
And they're all pretty long. I mean, only one comes under 4 minutes. But the first one is a little track called Show Don't Tell. It's 5 minutes, 1 second long by my count. Why don't we get right into it and give it a listen?
Let's do it. Show Don't Tell. What a way to start the album. But before we get into the music, let's dive right into the lyrics. I think the lyrics are quite straightforward. My interpretation here is Neil Peart has written an effective, straightforward set of lyrics in favor of skepticism. I mean, is he basically just saying, yay, skepticism in here?
I think it's, again, Neil Peart being Neil Peart. I think he's basically saying, like, look, I'm not going to listen to your bullshit until you can prove it. And so, yeah, skepticism. I guess that's another way of putting it.
There aren't a lot of songs out there that are kind of an ode to skepticism.
But I'm wondering what the historical context or personal context for Neil that would inspire him to write these lyrics then.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. I happen to have done some research and I found it out. You may remember from the 90s, there was someone who did infomercials on late night television named Tom Vu. Do you remember Tom Vu?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say Billy Mays, but he had a great product, OxyClean. He passed away.
Tom Vu was a very outspoken, wild, short Vietnamese man who would appear with bikini-clad women on yachts and in boats and stuff.
Yes.
And he would sell classes about how to become a millionaire in real estate. Mm-hmm. And that's what this song is about, Ross.
I mean, if you bought real estate all over the country in 1988, 89, you'd be a millionaire by now. I mean, he's not wrong. Pretty much anywhere.
I made up the Tom Vu thing. I think that
he existed. He was a real person, though.
He was a real person.
Yeah.
I feel like the entire world, by the way, has turned into Tom Vu.
We're all individual Tom Vus. No,
I mean, basically the entire
type of like
landscape
is the type of advertising you see on social media from like 20 somethings. It's so huckstery.
Yeah. No, it's total Tom Vu, right? I mean, basically totally. Every one of them has become Tom Vu. All right.
Why I'll never do this again. You know, it's the same hooks and it's the same BS. It's even more huckstery than it was before.
Fuck these kids, right?
Yeah.
All right, so listen, the only other comment I have about the lyrics here, the line, I, the jury, is very Judge Dredd, is it not?
Yes.
It is. It is.
Yeah. And I mean, this would have been around the time that, what was the Anthrax song about Judge Dredd?
Anthrax, it was called I Am the Law. Anthrax was to Judge Dredd.
Around this time, too.
Yeah, it was.
Great song.
I Am the Law was off of...
let's just make this
an
Anthrax podcast. I think they deserve it.
Well, Anthrax would be kind of a fun one to add to the list for the next bands to do.
You know what's funny? So Scott Ian, for his 50th birthday, this was a few years ago, he just had it at Molly Malone's on Fairfax in LA, and anyone could go there. So you could just go there and like hang out and buy shots to Scott Ian for his 50th birthday.
Did you go?
Awesome. I didn't go, but I just think that's great. He did that. That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty cool.
So back to Rush.
Music. So let's get back to the music here, Roth. One of the things that I think is kind of a troll that the band does, and they caught me on it twice while I was listening to this album. There is this very like quiet little percussion thing that they do at the beginning of this track, and it's barely audible. And it goes on for maybe 20 seconds. Yep. And so twice I like turned the volume way up because I was like, fuck, my volume's not on right. I can't hear the song. And then that like comes
that's what I'm saying. We're back, motherfuckers. That's what they're saying musically there.
Yeah, no, totally. And it really is kind of a very punchy, like very kind of guitar driven moment in there.
And again, it's not like a straightforward riff. It's kind of herky jerky, but Rush, being Rush, pulls it off masterfully, and it's very smooth, silky smooth, like almond milk. And they just pull it off. So it opens up with a really powerful rock-driven riff, guitar-driven riff, very bluesy. It's got kind of like pentatonic kind of feel to it, and it's and then it gets into the clean guitar, ringing out during the opening verse. And we're really getting a very new sound of Rush. Like I think this is like a new era of Rush that we're introduced to with this album. This isn't Skinny Ties era, is it? This is Black Tees era?
No, this is the beginning of the Black Tees era, in my estimation.
No, I agree. I think that's an apt era to place them in with this. And I mean, they wore black tees.
But I will say, I agree with you, Roth. I especially think that opening riff is like a real strong statement that the band is making. However, this song across the board, I was surprised at how much keyboard is in it. For, all the hype that kind of I had built up in myself about, okay, now we're back into this kind of guitar-driven era for the band. There is a ton of keyboard in this song, and the keyboard actually is quite prominent.
There's a whole interlude that's all keyboard. It's almost like a bass. It's not quite a bass solo. It's like a bass passage, like a very melodic bass passage, but it's synths on top of it.
Yeah.
And then he does a bass solo. He does the bluesy bass solo.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
and then it gets into a really great. It's a great song. It's a great opening track. It's very rocky. It's very bluesy. It's very funky at times. Synthy, guitar. It's got it all. I mean, it really has it all. They really pull out all the stops on this one.
It's one of the most kind of technical musicality forward albums on this, or songs on this album, in my opinion. I feel like they were kind of like starting this album off saying like, yeah, I know that we've been singing, and doing synths and blah, 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 but you got to remember we're kind of badass rock players, and that's what they're saying with this song.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, there's not much to talk about lyrically. Musically, I think we've touched on most things, but there's a lot of more substance, I think, in some other tracks. But this is another one of those things where it's kind of Neil Peart being Neil Peart. And I think in the type of skepticism he's examining here, or he's sort of like exemplifying here, is not. And this is what I really admire about someone like Neil Peart. It's not contrarian, right? Because some people they think being contrary to whatever a popular opinion is being skeptical, and it isn't, right? Being contrary just for the sake of being contrary makes you a dick, in my opinion, right? So this is about saying, no, I need to know the where, why, how, give me evidence, give me proof. Don't just tell me bullshit.
These are not, I'll take a slightly less optimistic view of these lyrics. They're not my favorite lyrics. They're not bad. They're just not great, I don't think. One music question though, Roth. Yeah. And again, I don't want to be too pessimistic about things, but I felt like this is the first moment where I feel like you can hear Geddy start to struggle to hit some of the highest notes. This is the first album where I really kind of feel like, gosh, he can't quite get there the way he used to.
And it's funny because I actually did this exercise just last week with my wife when we were driving to my in-laws. I played Marathon, I think it was. It was a song off of Power Windows, and I played it from the Show of Hands live album, which we're going to review in a couple of episodes with a couple of special guests. You're going to have to wait to find out. And he sang it perfectly. He sang it like he did on Power Windows. And then I said, well, let's hear it on like R40, right? And from 2013. And then you definitely hear his voice straining. And he's singing completely different notes and in a different range and different counterpoint. To do it. One thing about this song, though, I will say. So, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Okay. I would encourage the listener to listen to the line "I, the jury," like the second time through.
No, I think he's
the last time through.
He's just being cool.
I think he's having to push harder, certainly than he did, when we're going back to 2112 era, right?
Obviously,
which is understandable. I mean, he's 20 years older.
But it's not noticeable. I don't think it is.
Well, only if you have very sophisticated ears like I do, Roth.
So one of the things about this song is that Ged uses the wall bass for this entire album. And I got to say, this is my favorite bass sound of all Geddydom. Is on this album. I just love the bass sound on this.
Yeah.
And I love the Rick. I mean, and that's saying a lot because it's like the Rick era, the J bass era. This is some of the best sounding, and the Steinberger era too, which has some amazing stuff. But this wall bass, it's my dream to own a wall. They're expensive. Wow. They're a British bass company, but the sound of the bass in this is just it's so punchy and warm, and it's just perfect.
Yeah, there is a 3-year back order for wall bases
Is it
right
really?
now. You request one. Yeah, we were talking about it. I went to their website and they basically just said, we have a 3-year back order. We're not even taking any orders right now until we go through
one day it will be mine. It will.
Well, maybe on eBay, Ross.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I looked. I mean, they're like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 wall bases out there, so they're not cheap.
Don't
wall
sell
base,
your dream down the river just because you see the big,
A wall bass and a Monteleone while he's still alive. That's like my Monteleone acoustic is also my dream. So anyone want to support the podcast by buying me a wall bass or a Monteleone acoustic guitar, please do that.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Dan, you could give a firm handshake and a cup of coffee.
All right. So why don't we move on to Chain Lightning, Roth? Chain Lightning is the second song on side A. It comes in at 4 minutes, 33 seconds. Music, Lee and Lifeson, lyrics, Peart. Shall we?
Let's listen to it. So this is another one of those songs that has a sort of a quirky sort of riff at its heart. Like they had it on Nothing Can Survive in a Prime Mover, was it? On Hold Your Fire. And Rush finds a way to make it work. But let's talk about the lyrics, Dan.
So wait, but while you're saying that, what is the riff? Should we play the riff or do you want to sing the riff? Because I don't know which riff you're talking about.
It's just the main riff, dun 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 dun. It's an augmented fourth.
Okay.
So it's a fifth, then he goes down to the fourth. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah. Well, all right. So to talk about the lyrics here, I actually love these lyrics. I think they're great, super effective lyrics. They're like incredibly optimistic. They're just kind of like wholeheartedly optimistic. And there are certain lines, I think, again, one of my through lines for this album is they've really, over the course of the synth era, the Skinny Ties era, I think they really perfected or came close to perfecting what Rush's pop songwriting, what their interpretation of pop songwriting is. And I think that you hear that all over the compositions on this. The choruses tend to be, I think, pretty memorable. And there are some of these like lines that really, just stick in your head because of the melody and just what the line is. And in this one, it's that reflected in another pair of eyes section. Just really, really memorable.
Yeah, and it's also the way the pre-chorus, respond, vibrate, feedback, resonate, call and response.
In it.
Yeah, it's
great.
It's a great transition, and it's not something you typically hear in music in general, right? They're doing something very unique here. And it's one, we've discussed this in the past, especially on Hold Your Fire, about how the vocal interplay with the music is just so well placed. It's like perfectly placed. It's like surgically placed. And this is one of those examples, I think, where the call and response between the vocals, the lyrics, and the instrumental is to really great effect for the song.
Yeah, so only the last comment kind of I'd make about these lyrics. I don't know how many people didn't know what sundogs were, but I didn't know what they were. So I looked it up, and it's because it's such a memorable line on this album. Sundogs fire on the horizon, beginning of the chorus, right?
Yeah.
I've had this chorus stuck in my head basically since 1990.
I feel you.
And I finally looked up sundogs. So sundogs are essentially it's an optical illusion that happens, especially in very cold weather. When the sun is near the horizon, it creates this circle around the sun and two little kind of centers of light appear at either side of the circle that surrounds the sun. So it's almost like a lens flare, basically. But the lens flare is happening through the atmosphere. So, in case you thought this was talking about like the Arizona football team or something.
I didn't even know they're called the Sun Dogs.
All right. So do you want to get into the music?
Yeah. So I already sort of started it. It's kind of quirky. I love the guitar solo on it. It's one of my favorite guitar solos.
Yeah.
It's just a really great, it's very emotive. But it's also it just fits the song perfectly. I think you just have to listen to it. It's hard to, it's like talking about music is like dancing about architecture.
Well, Ralph, we're doing a podcast about music, so you better figure it out. The chorus in this song, I think, is my only, as memorable as that vocal line is. I feel like the instrumentation is the only quibble that I have with this song, really. I feel like the chorus could use some kind of dirtier, crunchier guitar, because there are sections in this song that are really kind of rocking and pretty heavy, like the section at the end,
contrast.
Right?
Yeah.
But the chorus is very kind of flouncy. And
I like the contrast. I actually enjoy it. I actually wouldn't disagree with you on that.
Okay, that's fine.
It's kind of like you're running down the runway, and then the chorus is like you're taking off, right? It gets smooth again.
Yeah, but then you crash again and get into the heavy stuff.
I don't say you crash. Maybe you bounce and go for a go around.
All right. Well, audience. My last complaint, and I already kind of said this up front.
Why so much hate, complaints, man?
That's nice. Song. That's nice is like that inclusion of that. That's nice is like the better beer in territories.
Okay, now why that's nice? Like, do you know the motivation behind it?
No idea what that was. No idea why it's there.
Okay, so maybe they heard the podcast. They traveled to the future. They're like, hey, this guy Dan, I don't know who the fuck he is, but he keeps complaining about fade outs. And they're like, well, let's give him something like special, and we'll say that's nice.
Yeah,
it's not a fade out. Maybe that's what they're referring to. It's not a fade out.
It could have been. Nice. But I'd say, you know what I'd say to them? Swing and a miss, guys. Swing and a miss.
So fade out sucks. End with a nice.
I actually love the thing that the thing that I think is a shame about that. That's nice is I love the end of this song. I love that kind of musical figure that they play, and then they do the that's nice, and I just think it's kind of goofy. Basically,
now was it Rupert Hine or was it Neil Peart who said that's nice?
No idea. Don't know. We can look that up. Maybe while we're listening to the next song, I'll look that up and I'll have the answer for you.
Okay, is that a segue, Dan? Is that what I heard?
Could be. Let's do it.
Because the past, I think, has a lot to talk about.
It does.
So this one is called The Past. It's track number 3 on Presto. It comes in at 4 minutes 51 seconds by my count. Yours results may vary. So let's listen to it. The Past. So what do you got to say about The Past, Dan? Come on.
Well, the first thing that I want to say is that's nice is Alex. It's neither Neil nor Rupert Hine.
Okay, if it really was Alex, he's going to come back and he's going to give us that 2-star review again, and we'll see the 2 stars.
I'm not sure, but so listen.
Rob, Alex, what are you waiting for? Give us
The Past.
Be a man.
Let's dig into the lyrics here. So this is one of the most emotive, beautiful sets of lyrics that I think Peart writes across his entire catalog.
This is the song where I realized this has some of the best lyric writing of all Rush albums.
Really, this is a beautiful execution. I would say that it fits within the same category of lyrics as songs like Analog Kid, Subdivisions. For me, this is kind of another example of Neil Peart really having very few peers when it comes to expressing the emotions of teenage angst in like a really honest, earnest, relatable way.
But he makes it universal.
Yeah.
By the end, I mean, it starts off with a very specific theme, very specific story, very specific scenario. But by the end, and musically, it becomes very epic sounding towards the end too. But
Yeah.
this song, it gets better as the song continues, right? It's one of those songs where you could start listening to it, you're like, this is good. But as it keeps going, you're like, holy shit, this is like an epic song. But towards the end, it gets really, it's a very introspective, self-reflective kind of song. And that's what I love about Neil Peart is he's not talking, he talks more about his own looking inward to examine himself and challenge himself than he does about, other people, you, this and this, and pointing the finger. And that's what I really love about him. That's why I think it's the catalog of Rush lyrics is the secular Bible, as I've once said.
We are getting those secular Bible t-shirts made pretty soon. And so you will be able to wear a t-shirt saying it is a secular Bible of a sort.
Yes. Atheists rejoice.
So yeah, I think these are really beautiful lyrics. We're kind of like getting around it, but basically there was the story goes that Rush's Neil Peart was on a ride speaking with a friend about teenage suicide. And there was, this was something that had touched his friend in some way. I'm not exactly sure who it was that this was kind of an issue around, but it inspired Peart to kind of write a song about that. And fundamentally, that's what this song is. But I don't. It's just not patronizing. It's so caring and. You really get a sense throughout these lyrics that he earnestly wishes that he could articulate this in a way that teenagers would like actually onboard. And you can also tell that he really, I think, genuinely, personally remembers these feelings of being that kind of a teenager. I think he's just really, really great at articulating that moment, the feelings that a person has during that moment in their teenage years.
Yeah, and it all culminates with these lyrics. I got to read the lyrics, right? In fact, I just had them and they came back up. There's a line towards the end. It goes, no hero in your tragedy, no daring in your escape, no salutes for your surrender, nothing noble in your fate. Christ, what have you done? And when you hear the music building up to that moment and Geddy singing that line, Christ, what have you done? Oh my God. I mean, it is one of the more powerful moments in all of Rushdom.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I also, I don't think that the lyrics are completely perfect. The line "dreamers tend to look at the cars," I don't think works that well.
Oh, I thought it was cars. I didn't realize it was cars.
Yeah. So all of us do time in the gutter. Dreamers tend to look at the cars. I think
sure it's not cards, and that's like a mistake because he does talk a lot about fate and.
I'm pretty sure on the Rush website it says cars, and it makes sense, right? Like when you're in the gutter, you're literally in the gutter of a street. And so what would you be looking at from the gutter?
You're right, yeah.
The cars. I just don't think that line is quite as powerful as all of us get lost in the darkness. Dreamers learn to steer by the stars is such a great like kind of couplet, right? And then that second one isn't quite as great, but gosh, the across the board, I would say that these are just really, really, really strong lyrics. I love these lyrics. And I don't know if you want to move into the music, but I think the music, this is one of those wonderful examples in the Rush catalog where like the music and the lyrics, I think both just hit on all cylinders. It is this is not one of the first songs that I remembered when we came back to this album, but this is exactly the kind of song that I'm really happy that we've done this project and we're like backtracking all these things because I'd kind of forgotten about this song, but God, it's a great song.
Yeah, I think this song is the heart and soul of the whole album, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think that it's a contender, isn't it?
Yeah, and like I said, it starts off ordinary. It's not bad, but it's slow. It starts off slow, and it's one of those songs where, like much of great art, if you're willing to invest in the build-up, it pays off in a big way. It doesn't always pay off, and that's why not everyone can be into good art, right? Especially with movies, right? I'm sure you've seen movies where you're like, okay, I'm going to stick with this and hope there's a payoff, and I'm going to trust that there is, and there isn't, right?
Yeah.
I think a good filmmaker, just incidentally, who does that really well is Adam McGoyan. Requires a lot of investment up front, but the payoff's worth it. That's what this song is. Fellow Canadian from Toronto, actually. So this is a song where it really builds to a pretty dramatic climax. And it really is, it's very poignant, not just about suicide, but I think just in anything where you let pessimism and defeat sort of take hold. And so I see it being more universal than just it being about suicide, though that's what it is specifically about.
Yeah, I want to get back to the music here for a second, Roth. The one thing that I wanted to ask you about, I felt like the use of synths, I think it was synths on here, but I'm not certain. In the second verse and the third verse, some instruments come in and it almost sounds like a flute or an oboe or something to me. It's not super high in the mix, but it's definitely there, and it's, you can hear it. If it is synths, which I'm assuming it is, because there's no acoustic kind of like woodwind or flute player or anything listed in the liner notes.
Yeah, it is. It is synth, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But it's like actually a very different way of using the synths than I think I've heard them do on really anything up to date, and really quite tasteful, a really nice accent, not overbearing. It's not really carrying anything in the song.
Very Beatles-esque.
Nice color.
Yeah, it's very Beatles-esque the way they're using it.
Yeah, I just think that this song really, you had the quiet verses, big choruses, and the tension and the kind of like emotion of the song builds over the course of the song. It's a really strong song.
And Neil knows enough to really hold back in this song, right? He's not going crazy in it, and he's really holding back, letting the lyrics shine. The unsung hero for this song, though, I think, is the guitar. It's so melodic. It fits in so well. It's really guitar. I mean, musically, bass and drums are very pulsing and very like steady throughout it, but it leaves space for the synths, like that section you mentioned, and the guitar to sort of dance around and really support the lyrics. But you can tell that musically, they all are saying, yeah, guys, this is like this one. You got to listen to the lyrics. Like these are important.
Yeah. Well, all right, Roth, are we ready to move on to track 3 already?
Track 4. That was track 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. Track 4. Gosh, we're flying through this one.
Yeah, we're getting concise. We're getting focused.
Well, we should change that. All right. So listen, Warpaint, Rafi. This song is 5 minutes and 24 seconds long. It is music by Lee Lifeson, lyrics by Peart. Shall we dig right into it?
Yeah, let's listen to it.
Let's do it. All right. The first stanza of these lyrics, Roth, is this about a teenaged mother who wants to leave her boyfriend? I really spent a kind of a weird amount of time trying to parse these lyrics, and I couldn't quite nail who that character is and what's happening there.
Okay, so it would have been 1990. So his daughter would have been, I don't know, maybe 10, 12. Right. So that is around the age they start, like vanity starts to kick in, right? Where they start wanting earrings or nails or makeup or whatever. I mean, they obviously, when they're like toddlers, they might want to do that, like just to play around. But this is when I think it becomes more where sort of identities start to form. So I'm curious to know if he's making a comment on his own daughter, his own family, and what he's seeing.
I don't know. I mean, like the way I read it, let me just tell you the way I read it, and it could be wrong. Okay, girl before the mirror appraises her disguise. Child become a mother, right? What does that mean? Tries to fix her eyes. So what I picture when I hear the rest of the lyrics and that line, she is in front of a mirror. Her eyeshadow or her eyeliner is running, and she's trying to fix that. No more of his excuses. Seems like that's got to be a guy, a husband, a boyfriend. It has to be today. She can keep her fantasy if she can get away. So the way that I kind of the image that I kind of had was of a girlfriend or a wife, like trying to get her shit, like kind of trying to get her makeup fixed and gather the strength to leave her partner. That is the image that I had for that.
Yeah, I don't see it. I mean, I get where you're getting it from, but I also think, and I mean, dare I say, maybe he's talking about gender norms in this song too, right? Where women are the mothers and men are the warriors, right? Check your camouflage and the charger in the garage. It ultimately, where the song leads is about painting the mirror black because it's giving you a false impression of who you think you are, right? Ambition for illusion, dreams for self-delusion. And it's I think it's sort of saying, don't look at your reflection, like just look inside. Like these themes are very consistent through Neil Peart's lyric writing. So I think it might be more about how we feel we have to be a certain way. And we should not look at our reflection because it's going to lie.
Yeah, I think that is definitely.
I don't think it's as specific as it's about, teenage pregnancy.
All right. Well, you know what? Here's another place, Roth, where we're going to disagree. I think that the point of the lyrics, like I 100% agree that is that's kind of like the log line of what these lyrics are. But the second verse, if you read it, it is a very specific scene that he's painting, right? Boy before the mirror, checks his camouflage, all the things that you just said, polishes his armor and the charger in the garage. The charger actually, I think, refers to a Dodge Charger, a literal charger. We know that Peart is a car fan and loves muscle cars. Charger is a classic muscle car. Why would it be what other kind of charger is in the garage, right? No more lame excuses. It has to be tonight. If he can take the princess, he can take the princess if he can take the fight. So what I imagine is this is a teenaged guy, like getting all ready to get in his car and go like fight for some girl that he has a crush on. But I think that is a very specific scene.
We'll tie it back to about the mirror and conceit and for pride and all that. So
yeah, no, I think it fits the theme and it fits the chorus. But I bring up that verse because if he's so specific about the scene in that verse, he must have some character and scene in his mind when he writes that first verse. But maybe I don't know. I
think he's just he's illustrating like tropes about a teenage boy, a teenage girl, right? I think that's what he's getting at, and that this is what you think you need to be, and you don't.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I think he is saying that stuff. I think he absolutely is saying that stuff. Well, anyway, I think that the fact that we're talking about these lyrics this much, at least in my opinion, I think that these are really, really strong lyrics because they're so evocative in that way. I would also say this is another example of him channeling the tumultuous adolescence really well, better than most lyricists does.
I think what you just said there is what the song is about, tumultuous adolescence. Because I think where the song eventually goes lyrically is about don't mistake what you see in yourself for something that it's not, because it's very easy to do that if you look into the proverbial mirror or the literal mirror. I think he's talking about proverbial mirror, and he's saying don't think what other people think of you, don't see that reflection of who you are as being truthful, because it lies.
Yeah, it's I would agree with that, Ralph. Now the music, I think the chorus, we were just talking about that. You were just kind of mentioning the chorus. I think the chorus in this song is so strong, and I think one of the really unique things about this song that I think is, again, it works really well, but it's somewhat surprising, is that sing-along section at the end where
I was just thinking that.
They literally have different voices. Yeah.
Black.
Yeah, it's like really, really interesting. I don't think they've ever done anything like that throughout the rest of their catalog, but it works really well.
Yeah, it's really hooky. It's really catchy. And again, the song builds up to that moment. It doesn't just come out of thin air. And because it builds up, because we have context, because we have, backstory, because we have this sort of, I said context already, but because we have this backstory to go off on, we're sort of invested in these characters and the story. By the time it gets to that, it's again, I hate using this word, but it's anthemic. You're saying, yeah, fucking paint it black, let's sing it out. It's like singing Hey Jude. It's like na 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 from Hey Jude.
Yeah, it's a very anthemic section of this song. It's totally unusual for this band, but works really.
You're rooting for the characters. I mean, that's why you sing at the end of Hey Jude. You're rooting for this guy who's experiencing this hurt. And the same thing with this. These people have come to this grand realization and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm going to paint the mirror black. You're right, Neil.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting song. So the chorus I love. The verses, I actually could leave that keyboard part. There's a keyboard part in those verses that I am not a huge fan of.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But again, I think it's weird. There's still moments on this album where the interview that I read with Getty about this album and about kind of the, much discussed move away from keyboards, it was like he and Alex pledged to each other that they were really going to kind of move away from all of the sequencers and the keyboards and all that kind of stuff. But then he says at the end of it, he's like, yeah, but in the end, we really couldn't resist using them for some color. And it almost feels like that keyboard part in the verse of this is one of these examples where it's like Getty just kind of couldn't help himself, and he's not fully willing to walk away from that stuff quite as much as maybe he wants to on some level.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I still think it's a very rockin' song, especially towards the end.
It is. No, I mean, those chorus sections and that end section is just like full rock. But
and it's not something you'd expect from the song, with the way it starts off and the way it starts going.
Yeah.
So it is somewhat unexpected.
It is. All right, Raf, are we ready for Scars?
Yeah, let's talk about Scars. This is a good track. So this one is 4 minutes, 7 seconds long. It's one of the shorter tracks, not the shortest, but it's one of the shorter ones. And it is called, as you appropriately said, Scars. Let's listen to it. This is a unique song, Scars.
Yeah, so it seems to me, as I kind of went through these lyrics, is this fundamentally a song about aging? You do have Neil Peart kind of hitting 40 years old. He's coming up on 40 years old when this album is being recorded and released. That's the way I interpreted these lyrics.
Yeah, I think that is a appropriate interpretation. I see this song, more conceptually as almost like a tone poem, a rhythm tone poem, than a song. That's why I said it's sort of unique. It stands alone on the album. It's mostly an ongoing groove with Neil Peart doing a lot of very interesting rhythmic patterns in the background, very sort of tribal and sort of Aboriginal, if you will, and it's a lot of color coming from Alex. Getty is pretty much straightforward, just singing and playing a bass groove. But it's a really interesting song. It really is. I enjoyed listening to this again. Now, lyrically.
Lyrically, so I think that you couldn't resist getting into the music stuff. I think there's a lot to talk about with the music stuff here. But it is one of the little techniques that Neil uses in this that again is something that he hasn't done. I can't think of a single example of him doing this throughout the rest of the catalog that we've listened to so far, is this repeated line at the end of every one of the verses. I get this feeling, and I think it works super well.
Yeah.
It really kind of, it does so much work for like the structure of the song somehow. And it really makes these verses have this interesting sense of almost foreboding, right? Just that line just does so much work within these lyrics.
Well, and I think there's one word in particular that I think reveals a lot. The very first line is, "I've stood upon my mountaintop," not the mountaintop, but my mountaintop.
Yeah.
What do you think that means? What do you think that means?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know what it means. Why he used
my Jiminy
instead of.
Yeah, what do you think that means?
I don't know, but I do think it's interesting. He said my mountaintop. I mean, listen. Then he says he walked above the pavement with my senses amplified. Sounds to me
like a zombie song.
No, that's a drug. That's a drug reference right there, my friend. But no, I mean, I think that this is a.
Maybe this is a drug song. All my nerves are naked wires tender to the touch, sometimes super sensitive, but who can care too much?
Each emotional injury leaves behind its mark. Sometimes they come tumbling out like shadows in the dark. I think is again one of these. It's a very interesting interesting way to attack aging, right? To discuss aging. Like over time, you accumulate these scars, all different kinds of scars, as a result of emotions, experiences, places that you've been, people that you've met. And they all kind of over time build up so that you've almost got this symphony of all of these like emotions and feelings and memories and everything. And I think when he says, I get this feeling, it really is a fun way to kind of like say, oh yeah, all of this stuff gets repeated and kind of burped back up over the course of your life. And that's kind of what, getting older is all about, which I don't know. I really liked it. I think these are really, really strong lyrics. Very cool.
Are you sure it's not like a drug song?
It could be a drug song, but I don't think it is, Roth.
At this stage in their career, I don't think they were necessarily doing that.
I mean, listen, the only, I think, unapologetic drug song that exists in the catalog, Passage to Bangkok. Am I right?
Yeah. No,
all right.
absolutely.
So anyway, so do you want to talk about these? You dove into the music already.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a musician.
Yeah, no, I mean the comment that you made, it really matches up with one of the things that I said. It's very atmospheric. It doesn't have a kind of a pop song structure in the same way that some of the other songs on this album do, and it was evocative of mystic rhythms to me.
Well, and the main riff is a synthesizer bass part.
Yeah,
it's not even a bass part. It's a synthesizer. It's a very percussive synth bass sound.
Yeah, I don't. The music is. I think if you kind of bucket together the what I've called in the past like world music, influenced songs that they've been doing in and around the kind of late '80s, this is, I think, musically one of the more successful of them for me. Because it's driving, it isn't driving in a kind of a classic Rush rock or pop way. It does have some drive. It doesn't feel quite so kind of meandering.
What it felt like to me is, it felt like so Alex would be playing, doubling the bass part and during some of it. Yeah, it feels very jammy, right? It feels like they're just jamming in a bar or a basement somewhere. That's what it feels like to me, and they're just sort of playing around on it. So I don't know how important the music is to telling any kind of story in this. I think it's just kind of like, hey, this is a cool riff, let's jam on it. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. All right, Ralph, are we ready to move on to Presto? We're making record time. This is going to be the shortest podcast we've ever done. I don't know about that,
but yeah, let's talk about Presto. So this is the title track.
It is the title track, Ralph, because the album's called Presto.
Yes. So remember how I said last time, but this is just sort of a little interlude, but remember how I said last time I made a Hold Your Fire t-shirt? I remember I actually bought a Presto t-shirt at the Rush concert when they came on tour. And I actually saw it. I don't know if you were with me, but I actually saw Rush on this tour in the Maple Leaf Gardens in downtown Toronto on this tour. And that was like visiting Mecca. To see Rush play at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto, that was pretty awesome.
I saw them on this tour with you, but I don't remember where it was. But I definitely went to go see them with you on this tour.
I went to the Buffalo Odd, right? So we saw them in Buffalo. And then I also went and saw them in Toronto. I might have seen them in Syracuse or Rochester too. I want to say I know I saw him at least twice on this tour, though.
Okay. Well, I think I only saw him once on this tour, and I probably just went to Buffalo. But anyway, Presto. Shall we, Ralph? Shall we dig into this little nugget? It is 5 minutes and 45 seconds of Rush goodness. Why don't we listen?
If I could wave my magic wand, I'd make everything alright. I'm not one to believe in magic, but I sometimes have a second sight. I'm not one with a sense of proportion. When my heart still changes overnight.
So before we get into Presto, I do want to say we did go to one show. I know in Toronto.
Yes.
Summer of '95, the Rock and Roll Summer. Your sister was going to go with you, and you're like, "Hey, there's this guy Jeff Buckley. I got an extra ticket. Do you want to go see him?" I'm like, "I like the song Last Goodbye. Yeah, sure, I'll go." So I went.
Yes.
And I remember going to see him. He was opening
for Juliana Hatfield.
Yeah. And because she had, she was the headliner, but by this time, Jeff Buckley's single was getting big enough, or it was sort of like a co-headliner. He played first. And we left. We both, for whatever reason, we were both like, yeah, let's just leave. Like after he played, we just left. And I remember the entire drive home, we were like, holy shit, what did we just see? Like we knew that moment that we saw something fucking like once in a lifetime great.
Yeah, he was an incredible performer. I mean, he was just an incredible performer. So talented. Yeah, that was a great show.
Music Hall. Yeah, in Bloor. Or Bathurst.
All right, so Ralph, why don't we get into Presto? Now listen, there is a question that I have for you about these lyrics. And it's just, a question I want you to kind of like opine on. This song, when I read through these lyrics, listened to the song, it felt to me like it was kind of the counterpart to the song Fly By Night. I got this distinct impression. This is him writing lyrics about leaving his family and his loved ones to go on tour in a very kind of sad, wistful way. In almost the exact opposite way of like there's this like kind of childish amped up enthusiasm around Fly By Night, like him going to London and going to do everything. This one is a little bit more like, oh, I've got to go and leave, and I wish I could be with you, and like, and then it's this really heartfelt, like, beautiful poem to, I don't know who, but I kind of imagined it was his wife and his family.
And that's a very interesting take on it. I never thought of that. I thought it was more of a general kind of sort of reflection.
Yeah.
But I think in a more specific sense, I'm not saying you're wrong. I think it's a very intriguing theory.
Yeah. I mean, really the section of the lyrics that kind of do that work for me is, the evening plane rises up from the runway over constellations of light. I look down into a million houses and wonder what you're doing tonight. Like, that is such a great section. And it is so, again, it's pure capturing something that lots of us have felt, right? Like that you're taking off in a plane, you're looking down at the houses, and you're thinking about the people that you've left behind someplace, and you're wondering what they're doing. This is just like, I think he's tapped into this really great micro moment that's super universal and is so heavy with like emotion.
I think you're right. Not so much with his family, but I think it's more about someone he may have loved, who might have been adversely impacted, or his current wife at the time, or his daughter. Again, it could be about his daughter. I think it sounds like he's I don't want to say he's wronged someone, but he knows it like by saying if I could wave my magic wand seems to imply if I could make something, I mean, he says it, I would make everything all right. So it seems that, inadvertently, most likely, he had harmed someone, but they both can realize that it was not for any, ill will, and it was for something that was ultimately positive, but still there was sort of casualty as a result of his success, if we're going with based on your translation of it, because it's a relatively optimistic song. It's not super pensive, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's more like, hey, I know I hurt you, and we both have come to terms with it. If I could go back and do it again, and if I believed in magic, right? So, but he does say, if I'm not one to believe in magic, but I sometimes have a second sight. I'm not one with a sense of proportion when my heart still changes overnight. So this is interesting because Neil Peart is usually very reluctant to embrace any kind of sort of magical thinking, whether it's religion or superstition. And here in these lyrics, he's kind of admitting, maybe there's a little bit of this with my success. Yeah. Again, putting it in the context you presented.
I think no, and I think that's my interpretation of this. I don't know if this is like right or not. Is I really imagined this was Neil and his wife had gotten in some fight on the phone while he's out on tour, and he got angry, but he's basically just saying like, listen, I wish I could be there with you. I can't. Sometimes I get a little. Sometimes I radiate more heat than light. I get more angry than I am illuminating a situation, and I just wish I could change it. But
I think honestly, the more we're talking about it, I think it's about his daughter. I think it's about being away from his daughter and his family. Maybe his wife is included in that, but I think it's about, because it's a very loving song. Like I said, it doesn't sound like he feels like he's ever harmed. It's like, I have this immense love, and I know that I haven't been present. In that line, I radiate more heat than light. It's like you feel my presence more through heat than from actually seeing me, more than from visible light. And they actually revisit this concept of available light at the very last song on this album, which we'll get to. But I think he's talking about, I haven't been as present in your life. You felt my presence, but in a more oblique kind of sense, and not in a way that can make sense to you by actually seeing me physically with light reflecting off my body, right? Which is what someone is. Because it is kind of a joyous, it's pensive, but it's still kind of a joyous song. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, I think I think it is a very wistful song. I mean, think about, I had a dream of a winter garden, a midnight rendezvous, silver blue and frozen silence. What a fool I was for you. That's like a classic. Yeah. I'm remembering this scene of us just falling in love and being young. And there we were out in the snow. Right. And then, I don't know. I just feel like,
well, that would make sense in the context of a young mother, right? You are my wife and the mother of our child. And, and because it just, I can't shake the feeling that this is a song that isn't about lost love. It's about current and present love and feelings of, remorse for not having been more present. Well,
yeah, I do think that there is definitely that that sentiment that's kind of coming through, that remorse for not being more present somehow.
Yeah. And as a dad, like I felt that. I was talking with my wife about that theme this morning, not in the context of this podcast. So I can definitely see that. And I know Getty sort of talks about it in a roundabout way, sometimes directly when he's referring to his own relationship and his own kids, in My Effin' Life.
Yeah. Well, so I want to, we're talking a lot about the lyrics here. There's one other thing that I just kind of wanted to mention. I've talked a lot about how I think that sometimes Peart's lyrics can come across as too clinical, and as if there's almost a reluctance on his part to speak directly from his own heart, that probably isn't the right way to say it, to use the first person, to make lyrics that are too confessional. I think he sometimes can try to write in the third person. He kind of says, one should do this way, one feels this way, rather than saying, I feel this way.
Yeah.
And I actually went through the entire catalog, read every lyric up to this point, and counted the number of songs that were not kind of story songs, like,
that's
I'm in a spaceship, to see how often he used the first person. And if you exclude the story songs, right, where he's kind of writing from the perspective of a character in a story, he really does start to use first person significantly more later on in the career.
As he matures,
and he uses it most on this album. So to date, he uses the first person most on this album. Again,
I think you should read, if you haven't already, read Ghost Rider too, because that's clearly his most personal work ever.
Yeah, I should read it. I haven't read it, but I feel like that shift makes a song like this work so much well in a somewhat maybe surprising way, right? When you use that third person voice and try to make things like universal and broadly applicable, somehow it just makes them sometimes feel more sterile. But when somebody says to you something like, hey, I feel this way, it somehow is like, makes you feel more empathetic, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
And I think that this is an example of that working so fucking well in these lyrics. And I love that shift happened kind of over the course of his career. It's such an interesting little minor point of like maturation, I think, but really speaks to like how much he evolved as a lyric writer over the course of his career, which is not something that, again, before we did Backtracking, it even occurred to me that happened.
Yeah. No, let's talk about the music.
Let's please. Okay.
And this sort of, what I'm thinking is like going into the chorus towards the end, because it is a relatively poppy song. Like it's very a catchy tune. Yeah. So what is this? And I have one more thing to ask about the lyrics, but it says, don't ask me, I'm just sympathizing. Right. So it's, again, I think this is consistent with what we were talking about. I know how I've been, and I'm assuming this is how you felt. Right. And I'm giving my take on it. So this is the title track. And it starts off very, strong. It starts off with like a motif. And it starts off with, if I could wave my magic wand. And then there's sort of this ethereal keyboard sort of thing that takes us into a very open, just vocals and acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
Right?
12 string, right?
I don't know.
Jangly.
It sounds like I heard it guitar, but I don't know if it's a 12 string.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it is either, but when I heard it, I was like, man, this is a jangly 12 string, and it takes me right back to like closer to the Heart era.
I don't think it's a 12 string, but it's like an Ovation or something. It does have like a very,
you know what I mean? Kind of folky, almost a folky feel, which I think is so cool. That it pops up in this song.
Yeah, and it starts off, and then there's a couple of little accents with like the bass and that are a little quirky. But it really has a really great groove to it, like during the verse. Yeah. It's a very laid back, ambling feel. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying it's a joyful or a joyous song, right? When you read the lyrics, it's pensive, it's a little regretful, remorseful, but fundamentally, I think it's a joyous song. It's a contented song. It's one of those things. I know it's a universal thing. We've all had conversations with people where we're content and we've made peace with whatever, the past might have been, and we're just talking about it, sort of. What's the word I'm looking for? Nostalgically.
Sure.
Nostalgically.
Yes, nostalgically, yes.
And we can be nostalgic for things that were regrets and that we've come through eventually, and sort of talking about the regrets at the time, but everything worked out for the best. And I feel that that's where he is now, is that, okay, I've been on the road, I've been away. I remember these times we had, it strained our relationship, but we are in a good place now. I feel that's the tenor of the sound of this song is very joyous and content.
Yeah, no, I think that it is a very pretty song. It is like, kind of I don't want to say in your face pretty. It's unapologetically pretty. It is like lyrically pretty, musically pretty. It is not like a Rush guitar based Rush is back. Like, this is not the song that again.
It's organic. It's more organic.
I think it's a great song, but again, this is another one of those songs where I actually feel like, from a songwriting perspective, there is not that huge a difference between Hold Your Fire and this album. There's just a subtle but very meaningful difference in the way that they approach the instrumentation, I think.
No, and the one thing that I know musically with all these songs that they have in common is the build-up, and that's got to be a mark of Rupert Hine, right? Because these songs are they're all like really like discrete stories, and they build up to a climax, and musically, not just lyrically, but musically, in a beautiful way. Like, they're very tastefully done. So the other thing that I would like to consider too is that whenever Neil Peart writes, or Geddy or Alex writes sort of a personal song, especially with Neil, because he's the predominant lyricist of the band, we assume that it's him talking about his own relationships. But I played in a band with a guy, Bob Farah. He listens to the podcast. Hey, Bob, I think he's our number 3 fan. He might be our number 2 fan. Depends on where Levine is. If Levine got the reference to him last episode, then he's our number 2 fan. If not, and Bob gets this, then he's our number 2 fan. Levine's our number 3 fan. So you guys can duke it out. But Bob, prolific songwriter, phenomenal songwriter, like truly phenomenal songwriter. Melodics. I mean, he's written like 30, 40, 50 songs. I mean, just really great songs. And he invariably writes songs about his friends and will write them in the first person. So it's not just about him and his wife and his family. He'll sing a song where he's singing I and me and you. Yeah. And he wrote a song about me. It's called Pictures from Jane. It's on iTunes, right? You can listen to it. And he's singing it in the first person, but it's about me and my girlfriend, like back in college. So Neil Peart could be talking about Geddy or Alex or a friend of his, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be him. But if you look at it in the context of his life, and what we know about what was going on in his life at this time, it's not a stretch to say this is about his family, like his immediate family, his wife and his child.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, I think that, Raph, this song, very strong song. We are, believe it or not, at the end of the first side of this album.
Oh my God.
Okay, there is one more thing I'm going to say. This is probably going to annoy the shit out of you.
We'll save it for next episode. Thank you for joining us.
This specific song, Presto, my only main critical note here is I wish that they had just not done that if I could wave my magic wand thing at the beginning. I wish they just skipped that and went right to the guitar stuff.
Dude, I just said what a great part. You just fucking mixed what I was my big ups on this.
I'm just disagreeing.
You know what you just did? What? You were leaving the Elks Club Lodge. You're like, okay, guys, I'll see you next time. And then you just out of the blue, you cock punched me and ran out the door. That's what you just did. You just cock punched me.
Well, there it is, man. Nice cock punch.
So that said, that's side 1. We're going to be back next week with side 2.
We will be.
Tell the folks where they can find us if they want to send us hate mail about your cock punch.
Listen, there is a lot for us to discuss. We've got some disagreements on the lyrics here. We have some mixed feelings on the album. Raph is an unapologetic fan. I'm a little on the fence here. However, we want to know what you think. So the way to do that is to follow us and then message us on Instagram or X. And our username is at BacktrackingRocksRox. You can get us on Reddit. Our username is BacktrackingRocksRox there, or you can just email us the old-fashioned way, backtrackingrocksrox@gmail.com. We will answer your message. We will consider your opinion, and we will comment on it in the future.
And join us next week as Dan and I go to the mats on side 2 of Rush Presto.
Bye-bye.